You're live.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Almost afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Chamber's annual Legislative Symposium, brought to you again this year virtually and also presented by our friends at Eversource. I'm Mike Skelton with the Greater Manchester Chamber, and we have a very busy program this morning, but a really good one. And we're very fortunate to have Senators Morse, Soucy, House Speaker Packard, and Minority Leader Renny Cushing all joining us today during a very, very busy time in the legislative session. So we feel very fortunate for that. A few quick announcements. I want to welcome our chamber board members joining us this morning. Nathan Saller, who's our chairman of the board from Bellwether Community Credit Union. Joe Raska from York IE, Ovid Lamontagne from Bernstein Schur, Preston Hunter from Ekman Construction, Ted Kitchens from Manchester Boston Regional Airport, Trini Houghton from Sojourn Partners, and Janelle McDonald from Stibler Associates, and also Donna Gamache from Eversource. Also want to welcome our board member and soon-to-be next Citizen of the Year, Anna Thomas. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize and thank our sponsors who do incredible work and supporting the chamber and making sure we can do all the things that we need to do as an organization to accomplish our mission. Our corporate sponsors today are Dartmouth Hitchcock Health and Manchester Boston Regional Airport. Our advocate sponsor is our Comcast Business, Fidelity Investments, and Granite State Credit Union. And our presenting sponsor today is our friends at Eversource. So I'm pleased to have Will Craig from Eversource here today to say a few words and welcome us. Will?
Thank you, Mike. Again, good morning. It still is morning. We're at Eversource are pleased to lead this, to sponsor this event as we have for many years. I want to thank Mike and the Chamber for providing this great opportunity to hear firsthand what's happening at Concord. And it's helpful for us, particularly at Eversource, to hear about what other issues, aside from energy, are impacting the state's business climate. This has been, as everyone knows, an extraordinarily challenging time for our elected leaders, and we're all truly grateful for your commitment to our state. Thanks to Senators Morse and Soucy and Representatives Packard and Cushing for joining us today. And although some of you will miss wearing pajamas Monday through Friday, we do look forward to seeing everyone again in person soon. Looking forward to a great discussion. Thanks so much, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Will. And thank you again to Eversource and all of our sponsors. We really appreciate it. So our format today is going to be a series of one-on-one moderated discussions. In just a moment, Senator Morse is going to join me on screen, and we'll start, and then he'll be followed by a discussion with Senator Soucy, Speaker Packard, and then Representative Cushing to close out. So Senator Morse, again, thank you for being here and welcome. I know this is a really, really busy time for you. And I wanted to start just by asking about the state budget. I know that's a big focus point right now. The Finance Committee passed out of committee the budget proposal last week, and I'm wondering if you could just touch on, from your perspective, why you think it's a good budget, and you're hopeful it's going to move through the process. What were your priorities heading into this process?
Sure. The reality is I've thought every budget I was ever involved with was a good budget. So, I'll constantly cheer for what the Senate does through the process. But, during times like this where we were working a little bit on Zoom, and then we finally got to get back together as finance and start to talk to each other, I think was why the budget actually developed a lot of things that we can agree on. Obviously, there's a few things that the Republicans and Democrats don't agree on, and we'll talk about those if we have time today. But, while the state has, we're tied for the lowest unemployment in the nation, and we're among the lowest poverty states in the nation. It makes New Hampshire very livable, and I think the message that I thought we should send from the state back in January was a message that New Hampshire's open, and we should start to lower taxes and live up to the promises we made 4 or 5 years ago on the business taxes. So that's exactly what we did when we built the budget. The first thing is it came in at 13.5, which is right about where we predicted we would bring the budget in, but it's balanced, and it's responsible. And I think as the public starts to look at this, they're going to see that the message of lowering business taxes, Senator Soucy actually talked about, exempting a group on filing taxes. We agreed with that. That was during the process that we've had all year that we talked about that. So those things all work their way into our thought process on the budget. But I think some of the major things that the chamber would like to focus on, payroll protection. We exempted that from business profits tax, and I think the Senate had to account for 69 million because they did that. But that was unanimous in the Senate. 24 senators, or 23, I didn't vote on it, agreed to that. We also lowered the rate on the rooms and meals tax to 8.5%. I did receive a letter today that said lowering it 0.5% doesn't matter anywhere. Try being in the southern tier when you're competing with Massachusetts on weddings and events. Having a rooms and meals tax that's at 9% made a difference. So I think as we start to lower it, it's a great thing. The governor took up interest and dividends tax and phasing it out over a 5-year period. The Senate actually looked at putting that forward a little faster, but we couldn't get to it because we decided that sending $100 million back to property tax owners in the state of New Hampshire was more important at this point in time to send that message locally that we're going to work with you. I think you'll see too in this budget, there's probably about $2 billion in programs and stuff that are going back, whether it's roads or bridges. All of this stuff's being worked on in several different buckets of money that are coming into the state of New Hampshire, and we tried to tie everything together with the budget. So I think you'll see all that as we play the budget out in public, which starts this afternoon. But there's definitely one major piece that New Hampshire, thanks to a senator that just started, she's a rookie, but she fought to make sure that the rooms and meals tax money went back to our communities. We put that in the budget. We talked to the municipal association and said, we're going to live up to what we put in the budget. We couldn't get to 40%, but we got to 30% returning back to our communities. So what we did was we took the rooms and meals tax and put a dedicated fund in the state of New Hampshire so that for the most part, you can't get at it. And we said 30% will come out of that fund and go back to our communities. That's 188 million, I believe, in this budget. 50 million more than was done before we got the budget in the Senate, and I think that's an important piece to play out because we said we were going to do it and we did it. So there's a lot of good in this, and there's a lot of what I believe will drive the economy in this budget. As we look at federal funds coming into New Hampshire, I think you'll see we're going back into fiscal on the 8th of June, and we're going to talk about the federal funds and how we'll disperse them. There's a lot going into mental health in that first disbursement, and I think the roads, bridges, broadband, all of that's going to start to play out as we go back. I think you'll probably see us twice in June go back to fiscal to talk about some of the appropriations we want to do with federal money. But it's a positive situation right now in New Hampshire. We're doing well, and I want to see us keep heading in that direction, and that's what we presented.
Last year around this time, when we were, early on in the pandemic, one of the major concerns was the impact of the budget having overall a deficit. And, as we've kind of moved through the months and entered this legislative session, that picture got clearer and clearer and improved considerably. And I think once the budget got over to the Senate, the revenue projections that you were able to, the Senate was able to draw upon were different than that of the House. Could you just speak to how that picture influenced your ability to move on some of these priorities, like the tax reductions that you've highlighted as being kind of a main focal point of the budget?
Yeah, I think it was pretty important because the governor had to borrow on the rainy day fund back in February to make it work, and he was borrowing $30 million. The House borrowed about $7 or $8 million. The Senate actually, in the first year, coming out of 21, put money into the rainy day fund. And then by the end of the budget that we built, we were able to put $155 million in total. That's climbing it up from 115 where we are today. But we also, as we saw revenues coming in, I think this is important to note. There's about $24 million we put in the education trust fund that we left there. In DOT, we put $50 million that we did not spend. We put it in the department. The 155 I just told you about that we put in the rainy day fund. I think that's all an important message to show that the accounting in New Hampshire is strong. Along with that, we've certainly were able in the Senate to look at spends that the House couldn't look at. Because they didn't have that kind of money coming in at that point in time. But, you know, when March and April played out so strong in New Hampshire, we were able to put back some of the spends, especially on capital, that I think they would have done in the House if they could have.
Had a question come in that was of interest to our members. As you know, we've followed energy issues for many years, an important issue for the business community. One thing HB2 does is creates a new Department of Energy, which is a relatively significant shift in state government. There's a big undertaking. What's your thought on, you know, are you comfortable with where that proposal is, and that the transition that will take place will improve that part of state government and the important part of, you know, moving energy projects forward, or you know, all the work that PUC does to ensure that you know, we have reliable energy service, good energy policy, and how that proposal will met out in the end.
Yeah, well, I'm not the expert in the Senate on that issue, but let me tell you how it started and how it finished. It started with the governor's plan, and when it went through the House accepted the governor's plan. And then when it got to the Senate, I asked Senator Bradley to review it. We made a couple of little tweaks in it so that it would function, and it's pretty much the governor's plan that was put in February, and the intention was so that the state of New Hampshire would function much better with the PUC and energy with projects, and to get them through. And I think the governor led our way on that one.
So the next phase of this process is, you know, to make sure our members are aware that the Senate will be voting on the proposal, I believe, this week, and then the House will have the opportunity to concur or non-concur, and then potentially goes to a committee to work out any differences. What's your outlook for that process? And I guess one question is, you know, the House passed their proposal. You know, to what extent, when you were putting this proposal together, or the Senate was working on this proposal, were you attempting to balance what the Senate's position is versus things that you had heard from the House that they would like to see in there in order for the budget to ultimately pass? I mean, is that a balancing act? And you know, are you confident about working out those differences and where we go from here?
Yeah, it's always a balancing act. I mean, there's no doubt. We heard the governor present his budget. The Senate, at least from my point of view, liked the fact that we were going to lead on tax reductions. Then when it got into the House and went through their process, I mean, you know, I joke with Kenny Weiler all the time. You know, he told me there'd be no changes for it to be acceptable to the House. And I keep telling him there's got to be 500 changes with everything the Senate did in this process. But at no point in time did the Senate not communicate with the House on every issue. I mean, if there was something that we were working on, liquor, there was a major move done in the House that the Senate didn't agree with. We certainly thought that we spoke to the Speaker about this. We think law enforcement and liquor was an important part of the Senate's budget. I know there's a few members that probably don't like that, but I think in what the Speaker told me, it's an acceptable position to be. right now, so we put it back together. But there's a lot of that in this budget. There's certainly a lot that we worked on language to make sure that it was acceptable, to the people that wrote it originally in the House or in the governor's office. And that's just the process that always plays out in the Senate. The Senate constantly has groups reviewing, like, the budget trailer bill that drives the budget, so that the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. So that goes on for a month while we're meeting on talking about numbers. So I think there's a lot of work that's gone into this budget in the Senate that probably will be acceptable to the House.
We have time for just a couple more quick questions. Kind of on that point about working on language acceptable to the House, one issue that has been in the news a lot, and I know we've heard from some members around, was formerly House Bill 544, which there was some compromise language that the Senate presented last week and changed the focus of the bill. And businesses and nonprofits outside of state government were concerned about that impact potentially to them. Could you speak to what that amendment did from your perspective, and why, what was the change the Senate made, and do you think that's still acceptable to the House in terms of going forward?
Yeah, that particular piece, 544 that you're talking about coming out of the House, I think the Senate probably spent the most time on in drafting, language about anti-discrimination laws, so that we could work together with the House to come up with something that I believe will lead the nation. I mean, I think the way we drafted it here in New Hampshire, it allows for people to have discussions, and that's what we all were striving for. So, I was presented that issue from a gentleman that actually had a rough time over in a school system, asking about what was being, taught to his daughter. And I thought it was wrong that, the people from the educational side were basically saying he couldn't ask questions. And that's kind of what drove us to putting together a team, working with lawyers to come up with discrimination policies that fit New Hampshire. And I think when the House gets to look at this today, I think they're going to find that we did some strong work here, and it'll work for New Hampshire and work for the nation.
Last question, Senator. This is more process-wise. Could you just speak to, from the legislator's perspective, how you're still navigating the COVID-19 impacts, virtual meetings, virtual hearings? Do you expect things to continue to change? Obviously, things are improving rapidly in our state and in our communities. Feels like we're starting to get back to normal. What does that mean for the legislature for the next couple weeks?
Yeah, for the Senate, I think, when we go in on June 3rd, it'll be what we're doing now. I mean, the Senate's been meeting here in the building, and we're able to use the House chamber to do that. That's not going to change. We have had one senator that was out, and we made all the senators voted on it. Quite honestly, we made accommodations for that senator to do it on Zoom. It worked, and it's working for the Senate, and we're able to talk to each other. Do I think the State House is going to open shortly? Yes. I think we're headed towards that. I don't think it'll be until we get through our June 3rd meeting that we'll start talking about it, but we've certainly reached out, with Donna and I talking about it, where we believe the Senate should be in that position. And I'll leave the House to a speaker that'll be after me. But the reality of the whole thing is, I think we're headed towards opening up the State House.
Great. Well, Senator, thanks so much for spending some time with us this morning. I know it's a very, very busy week, but really appreciate the time and all the work you and your colleagues in the Senate are doing. We hope to next year be back, hopefully in person at LaBelle Winery and having dinner all together again, and being able to be in each other's company. So we really appreciate the time this morning.
We'll be there. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Senator. All right, everyone, we're going to have a brief transition. In just a moment, Senator Soucy will be joining me on screen, but really appreciate everyone's time and attention. A couple of housekeeping notes. This production will be available afterwards on our YouTube channel, so feel free to share it with your colleagues and those in your company who may find it of interest. And I want to thank our sponsors again. We'll be able to give them another shout out, but I really appreciate their support. Senator Soucy, thanks for being here and appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you, Mike, and great to see you. And I know so many folks out there from the Greater Manchester Chamber. It's always a pleasure to join you.
Absolutely. I was just saying to Senator Morse as you're wrapping up, we really hope next year we can be back to our norm and together having our evening event. But in the meantime, I really appreciate the support and joining us. I know it's a really busy week. So let's dive right in. This week in particular, you have a budget that just will be going to the floor of the Senate. And Senator Morse was just sharing kind of his view on why he thinks his caucus has done a good job putting together that proposal. I'm wondering if you can just touch on your perspective of the budget proposal coming forward. Are there areas in there that you think are good, and where are the areas that you really think are problematic for you and would warrant you not supporting the budget?
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Certainly the process in the Senate, I think, works well. We do talk to each other. The Senate has the advantage of being second, so we have the advantage of more information when it comes to looking at revenues, and we also get different feedback sometimes from the departments. So I do think there are some good things to look at. There are certainly improvements over the House budget, particularly in community mental health programming support, transitional housing for people that were long-term at New Hampshire Hospital, reimbursements, increase in reimbursements for long-term care, which is a big issue here in New Hampshire, funding for water grants. And I also have to give a shout out to my friend, Senator Rosenwald. We will finally have a Medicaid dental benefit for adults, something that we have worked on for a number of years. And that was incorporated into the budget. So those are some positive things going forward. But despite that, I don't think we are going to be I know we aren't going to be supporting the budget in its present form, because I don't think it strikes the right balance. Particularly with regard to taxes. I know Senator Morse said that they led on tax reductions. I think more emphasis should have been placed on reducing property taxes and not just business taxes flat out across the board. We had a number of proposals to look at targeting aid, and we specifically looked at additional money for property tax reductions. I personally sponsored a bill to increase thresholds for business tax filings, trying to address small business issues. And one really stark example is this budget contains a reduction in the meals and rooms tax. What does that mean for people in the state of New Hampshire, people traveling in? Maybe a nickel or a dime on a hamburger. But our focus was more on making sure that the restaurant we want to get our hamburger at can stay open. So instead, we had proposed allowing restaurants to keep more of the commission that they collect in taxes. So that's really a big concern, exacerbating taxpayer costs. There are also some funding concerns. One that's critical, particularly for those of us in Manchester, there is inadequate funding for homelessness. And we had seen a 20% increase in homelessness before the pandemic hit, and certainly it was exacerbated as a result of the pandemic. So that's something that we're going to look to try to increase. We also have concerns about the amount of education funding, that it really isn't going to meet the needs that people are expecting. And last, there are three really big policy issues that I think just should be problematic for everyone involved. And that's the addition of a school voucher program into this budget, which will take money away from our local school districts. The means test only applies in the first year. Somebody wins the lottery, they're going to continue to receive scholarship aid in year 2. That doesn't seem fair. There was a significant policy issue in placing an abortion ban in this budget, which is something that New Hampshire has never had before. And last but not least, the issue that you identified of the divisive concepts language being incorporated into the budget. Unlike Senator Morse, I don't view this change that the Senate made to be beneficial to our community. Yes, it doesn't apply to businesses anymore. It applies only to government, which is certainly an improvement. but the language is very, very confusing, very vague, and I think will only lead to more problems along the way. It also poses a problem in that we might not be able to implement some of the trainings we've required of law enforcement, of our judges. That was part of the governor's law enforcement commission recommendations. So that's a big problem with the language that's there.
Is it your sense, having served for many years and being part of several budget proposals, were the inclusion of some of these, policy changes, was it higher than normal? I mean, the budget always seems to be a collection point for a number of different legislative proposals, but are we wrong to perceive that there might have been a few more of them included in this year's process for whatever reason? And what's your general feeling about, from a process standpoint, where we should separate budget issues versus policy issues that should be standing on their own in some legislative fashion?
I think House Bill 2, which is the trailer bill, so that's the language that enacts a lot of the policies, does contain more policy language that doesn't really impact or implicate fiscal policy, and that's really a concern. As I said, divisive concepts, the abortion ban, those are things that you would not ever normally see in a budget. It's been a long time since I've seen anything that significant incorporated into the budget. I mean, there's always some language that came from a bill that, has some consequence to someone, but these are really strident, very, I think, detrimental policy changes that we certainly are going to try to pull out of the budget. But, as Senator Morse said, I mean, this was a delicate dance, and I understand that from day one, when Chairman Weiler came to the Senate, he said, if these things aren't included, we won't support the budget. And that led to compromise, and I think the inclusion of things that probably shouldn't be there.
Looking outside of the budget, are there some remaining priorities or legislative issues that you're working on or tracking as the end of session kind of winds down? I know we're starting to get into the eventually the committee of conference phase for our members. That's when both the House and Senate meet to kind of broker any differences between legislation that both bodies have passed. And what are some of the priorities that you think the business community should be mindful of with those bills as they kind of head towards the finish line?
Sure. One of the things I mentioned earlier was I had sponsored legislation to increase the threshold for filing the business profits tax. The House increased it even more, and I certainly agree with that. I hope we can quickly concur and reach a resolution on that issue with respect to business tax filings. There were other bills dealing with child protection. We had incorporated those changes into the previous budget, but they weren't actually enacted. And then the pandemic came along and made those even more challenging. So we want to make sure that those changes are made. And we are going to continue, as I said, to try to make sure that any aid, particularly from the federal funds, from the ARPA funds coming forward, are targeted towards those that suffered the most during the pandemic and those that are trying to get back on their feet. So we have a number of bills to do that as well.
I asked Senator Morse about the kind of process and how the legislature has been operating during the pandemic. I think we talked about this last year, actually, and it was very new at the time. I'm just curious, what's your take and your sense of how things have been going and how they should go going forward? I think one conversation that's happened among advocates and interest groups and chambers, and it has been nice, the additional accessibility to participate in hearings and proceedings virtually. And, will that warrant some consideration in the long term to stick around, knowing that probably for you to do your job as senator, it may be easier to get your senators in the room together, but for the public to still participate in different ways, that seems to have been, I think, really effective and successful.
Sure. For anyone that's watched, I think our committees have been handled pretty seamlessly. We've been able to get all of our work done remotely, done so pretty well. I do think it'll be good to be back in the building just so that we can talk amongst ourselves as opposed to texting during a hearing. But I think the biggest thing coming out of the pandemic, even when we're back in the building, even when the building is open to the public, is that we need to retain remote access for people that want to participate. I think we opened a door to participation at a higher level than we've ever seen as a result of allowing remote access. I heard from many people that had previously driven to Concord, tried to find parking, ended up showing up, 5 minutes of 10 for a 10 o'clock hearing, only to find out it had been delayed for an hour, then running out, feeding the meter. There are a lot of difficulties at times for people that only participate on an occasional basis. So the ability to do remote and stay at your desk and jump in when you need to and listen in, I think is just a really great benefit for the public. And I want to do everything we can to retain that.
Well, Senator, I really appreciate all the time you spent with us this morning or now afternoon. I know it's a really busy week, and like we talked about at the beginning, hopefully next year we're back to doing this in person and opportunity to catch up. So thanks for joining us and all the work that you and your colleagues are doing right now.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks to your staff at the Greater Manchester Chamber and to all the members that participated. Thanks again.
Thank you, Senator. All right, we're moving right along. Our next speaker is going to be House Speaker Sherman Packard, who's going to be joining us on screen in just a moment. Really appreciate everyone's engagement. As you can tell, we have a pretty busy agenda. We're moving through things quickly. There is an Ask a Question feature down the bottom. So if you have some time and would like to pose a question of a particular issue of interest, you can use that, and I will try to get to as many as we can, though, given the pace of today's interview, we may not be able to get to all of them. And perfect timing, Speaker Packard, welcome. Thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, we'd like to just dive right in, and we're at a critical juncture in the legislative session. I know a lot of focus is on the Senate side, on them working through their budget proposal, but maybe we could just talk about what's happening in the House right now, and how much work does the House have left to do before the end of session. And I think, are there some, outside of the budget, some priority bills or issues that you think are particularly important that the House will be working on?
Well, we always have. We have about 95 Senate bills that they send over to us. And obviously we'll be voting on those Thursday and Friday because we are at the Bedford Sports Complex. Some of those are I would guess you would consider more important than others, obviously, as you go through the list of bills. And that's what in the process I'm going through right now, today and tomorrow, and trying to, categorize them all and figure out where we stand. We do have, a number of issues coming up. I mean, right to work and a few other issues like that we'll be voting on Thursday and Friday. So, it obviously will depend on where we are and what comes out of the vote. But our biggest thing is still the budget, and the Senate President and I have our meeting pretty much a number of times a week to go over the budget and make sure we're both be on the same page and realize how critical it is that we pass the budget. So that has been my top priority right now.
Yeah, and on that point, spoke with Senator Soucy and Morse just before you about the budget itself and their perspectives. I know it's still going to the Senate floor this week, but I imagine, given that communication, you've been able to kind of see the high points of the Senate proposal, and just curious what your reaction is to it. Do you think it's largely in line with the direction that you would hope it to be going in, and does it fulfill some of the priorities that your caucus set forward with their proposal?
Well, I think it, all last year when we were out campaigning, running all over the state, we made some promises to the citizens of the state that we were if we were put in control again, that we would make sure that we put a budget together that decreased taxes and made sure that money went back to this. More money went back to the cities and towns. And in our budget, we were able to do that. I mean, we decreased the rooms and meals tax. We decreased the business profits tax, the business enterprise tax. We had in our budget, as the governor did, a phase out of the interest and dividends tax. And we also put $100 million into the statewide property tax to reduce people's property tax. So, that was some of our main goals, and we accomplished all those goals, even though we didn't have the final figures that the Senate has as far as income goes. And, it's actually better than we anticipated. And that's great because we're able to, the Senate was able to make more cuts and send back more money to the cities and towns than we were able to because of the extra revenue that they had. So overall, I think the budget is great. And, some of the more controversial issues as far as the critical race theory and, abortion and stuff like that, I'm sure we'll be working on up until the last minute. And we have worked, extensively with the Senate on the language, and I'm confident that we'll get there and that the language will be acceptable to both the Senate caucus and the House caucus Republicans, and that we'll be able to approve a very good budget for the people of the state.
And so I take it that's a sense that you think, as is, I think, normal, the budget is headed for a committee of conference after it moves through the Senate, that there'll be another round of potential changes and negotiations between the House and Senate in a committee of conference?
Well, I think our goal is, both of us, is that maybe we could avoid a committee of conference and go right to a straight vote. Obviously that, some last minute negotiations between us and the Senate between today and tomorrow, and we'll figure that out. But I'm hoping that, we could get there. But one way or the other, if we do go to a committee of conference, I think it'll be a very short committee of conference compared to some I've seen in the past.
This has been a really unique time compared to the past in terms of operating, the legislature, and particularly the House with so many members. You mentioned you're actually hosting session down in our neck of the woods in Bedford at the Bedford Sportsplex, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to how that process has went, and where do you see things? Obviously things are on the upswing and really improving here in the state in terms of the state of the pandemic. Is the plan to finish out the session in that format and hopefully return to normal operations for next year's legislative session?
Yeah, we have 4 days scheduled over to the sports complex. We have, obviously the Thursday and Friday scheduled over there. And then we have the 10th scheduled, where we meet to either concur, non-concur, or set up concur and set up committees of conference. And then the 24th, we go in to vote on, committee of conference reports. As far as getting back into the chamber, it is our absolute desire and intent to actually be back in the chamber next year, 100%. If we do have a governor's veto, we'll make that determination. I mean, a veto day, we'll make that determination then.
Gotcha. Since we held this program last year also virtually, but we're only able to have at that time Senator Soucy and Senator Morse join us from the Senate. But so I'm curious from your perspective, from a House perspective, to just comment on how you think the state has done responding to the pandemic overall. I mean, that's obviously something we've all been watching, and we've had the governor join us for a number of events to share his perspective. So just that overall state response to the pandemic, but then also I know one issue that has been raised and was a position that the House Republicans had staked out and negotiated with the Senate was around the governor's emergency powers in responding to a situation like this. And I'm wondering if you could speak to, why that was an area of concern and what you think was addressed in that process.
Well, I think the governor overall has done a tremendous job getting us through this. And I mean, all the evidence is our unemployment rate, which the last I heard was 2.8%. We've done a tremendous job. We're one of the highest vaccinated states, from my understanding, in the country. I mean, we went through a little bit of rough time there, but right now we're every single number I've seen has been between 50 and 100 cases a day. We're down to 450 overall cases. Our hospitalizations are way down. Businesses are opening up all over the place. And I think, the overall job that he's done has been terrific. And I mean, there are some issues on the emergency powers that we're looking at, and we're probably going to pass a couple of pieces of legislation concerning that. And a lot of that has been in consultation with the governor. So I think that eventually, very shortly, the state of emergency will probably be ended. I can't give you a date because I don't know a date, but one way or the other, I think the state has done a tremendous job compared to a lot of the other states. And I think we're coming back. We're coming back really strong. And I see that we're headed for a terrific summer, in the hospitality industry and everything else. When I was leaving the State House on Friday, the cars were backed up on 93 coming out of Concord, I think about 5 miles. And I can't tell you how many I saw pulling travel trailers and campers and everything else. So I would assume that the tourism industry did very well this weekend, regardless of the fact that we had a horrible weekend.
I think that's very true. And, we've been feeling that definitely here at the chamber and talking to a lot of our other chamber colleagues in other parts of the state. So hopefully that continues. I know a lot of businesses are counting on a big summer of recovery. I wanted to ask a little bit more just about, your position and the role you stepped into, obviously with the tragic passing of Representative Hinch. You didn't expect or anticipate coming into this role when you did, and the speakership is an incredibly challenging and busy role, and managing 400 plus representatives and getting them to move forward. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to kind of your experience stepping into that role this year, and particularly navigating it during a pandemic when you have newer members who hadn't served before and are stepping into a unique period. And I think that's a good perspective for our members and the community hear from, is to understand how the legislature operates during such a challenging time.
Well, it certainly was something that was unexpected. Former Speaker Hinch was probably my closest friend. And, we worked tremendously well together, and I still miss him. I miss him. I'll miss him for the rest of my life. But having said that, when we heard of his passing, it did put a new perspective on my life, moving forward. I mean, we did have to have another caucus and another election, and I was fortunate enough to win that. And, then it was moving forward. Every one of I've talked to some of my colleagues across the country, and they all have, certain, things that they have to be concerned about, but none of them have the situation we have with 400 representatives. And it's not easy to even do something that the Senate president has over in the Senate with 24 members, and you multiply that 10 times over. And trying to put together our committees And we have, four rooms over in the LOB that we doubled up and opened up to double rooms. And, we did, obviously, we are doing hybrid committee meetings, and that has worked out up to a point, but there have been a fair amount of glitches in that system. I mean, it's working, and the staff has been doing a tremendous job, but because of the amount of our people, it hasn't been that easy. And I just would like to comment on the remoteness. What we've seen is a tremendous amount of out-of-state people calling in to our committee hearings compared to what you would get, normally if we were meeting in person. And I guess you'd have to decide for yourself whether that's good or bad. But, sometimes you hear, 350 were for it and 10 against it, or vice versa. And, maybe out of that 350, 150 might be out-of-state people that are calling in and voicing their preference on a bill.
Sure.
So it has its good parts and its bad parts. My goal is to get back into the building and have committee hearings in person, and we'll determine on the rest of it as we move forward and progress forward. But there's goods and there's bad about all this remote. Frankly, I think there's nothing like being in person. I mean, for quite a while, we had members that never have stepped into the chamber. And I think, our Democratic colleagues had the same thing. Some of their new members haven't even been into the chamber yet, or maybe been in there once for orientation. Part of the thing in the House has always been, as many years as I've been here, is the relationships you develop when you're meeting in person in a committee room and you're sitting beside a person for 4 or 5 hours. You develop a personal relationship with them. You might go to lunch with them, and you get to know them as a human being, not somebody on the other end of a Zoom call. And I think that's something that our body is lacking greatly. And I think that it's very important that we get back to that personal contact that I think it was Senator Soucy was talking about, or Senator Morse, that we get back to that personal contact. And I think that'll be good for the institution.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing all that. I think you're right. It's very much a balancing act. We're going through the same thing with figuring out in the business world what meetings should go back to being in person, what should stay virtual. I will just say, when the time comes to consider that remote access, that's for hearings and for participants, understand totally the need for legislators to be together. I think one of our challenges over the years, just anecdotally, is for business people to be able to leave their business and go and participate in the legislative process has always been a challenge, given how compressed that timeline is. And so if there are more options in a way to preserve that option for people who are truly from the state, that would be a great outcome. Mr. Speaker, thanks so much for taking some time today. We're running up on our schedule. So I really appreciate your words and visiting with us, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing, and good luck with the rest of the session.
Yeah, I would just like to close and say that, we have all options on the table right now, that we haven't made any definite decisions as to how, when, or where is to say, but all options are on the table. And as this whole process plays out, which no speaker has ever had to do before, or no Senate president has ever had to do before, we'll figure it out, and we'll do what's right for the people.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Have a great day, and we'll hope to talk again soon.
Okay, thank you, and hope to see you next year.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, we're in the home stretch. Our final speaker will be Representative Renny Cushing, who is the minority leader in the House. He's going to be transitioning on screen in just a moment. And just to wrap up again, I want to thank our sponsors as Representative Cushing is joining us. Our corporate sponsors, Dartmouth Hitchcock Health, Manchester Boston Regional Airport, our advocate sponsors, Comcast Business, Fidelity Investments, and Granite State Credit Union, and our presenting sponsor, Eversource. Really appreciate their support. Also want to put a plug in for the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee for anyone who is interested in discussions like this. We meet once a month, and it's a great opportunity to follow all the different policy issues that the Chamber is tracking and of interest to the business community. You can always reach out to me and our team and be happy to get you involved with that. So Representative Cushing, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, you're batting cleanup today after having spoken to Senator Morse, Soucy, and we just got off with Speaker Packard. So want to ask you about some of the same issues I've discussed with them today. First, want to really talk about the budget. That's obviously the main focal point of legislative session right now. Have you had a chance to kind of look over the Senate's proposal, which is going to the floor this week? And are there elements of that that you think are improvements over the House version? And what are some of the issues that are still problematic to you in terms of the budget?
Well, I mean, there are a host of issues that I think are problematic over the budget. As a kind of a top line, I think the fact that we are using the budget as a way to advance other non-budgetary legal constraints is not something that I readily embrace. I think we look at the kind of the decision to include, a very divisive, concept bill that was House Bill 544 that just does nothing except kind of chill, free discussions about issues relating to our own history, about race, about, misogyny. That to me is terribly disturbing. The other thing is just a kind of a broad sweep to include other, what I would consider non-budgetary germane articles are included. I think that there are a number of concerns that we had with the House that have not been addressed by the Senate. I think it is a scandal that the legislature, the Senate, has decided to take general fund monies and use it to make whole speculators of the FRM scandal. This is $10 million of general fund monies at a time where we've never in the state of New Hampshire provided any general fund assistance to any victim of crime, be it, survivors, homicide victims, be it rape victims. And all of a sudden we've elevated this special category of speculators to be treated as though they had suffered losses akin to those that people who have been victims of violent crime have undergone. I think there's we see what I believe is downshifting on local communities. We've walked away from the commitment that was made 2 years ago to augment public education funding. I see what this budget represents is really a kind of a betrayal of 300 years, 50 years of support for public education in the state of New Hampshire, and that's deeply, deeply disturbing. I think that it fails to address all of the unmet needs that were there, existed before the pandemic, that have just been exacerbated by the pandemic. And I take a look, there's a deficit in how we're treating, people who are most vulnerable in our society. We fail to address fully the mental health crisis that we're experiencing. We fail to deal with some ongoing domestic violence problems. We fail to deal with substance use disorders. And those are all items that, we have a responsibility to address and to take care of. So I have not seen anything in the Senate budget that gives me any, cause to be inspired by what is coming back over to the House.
I posed this question to Senator Morse and Speaker Packard in kind of different ways, but just with your work in the House and kind of knowing where House Republicans were and kind of establishing their position on the budget, do you think it's likely it's going to go to a committee of conference and require further negotiation just for the House, for the Republican caucus in both houses, both the House and Senate, to work out a compromise here? Well,
to the extent that there's, internal conflict between the Republicans That's something I recognize that there are pro-Sununu and anti-Sununu Republicans within the House caucus. I represent the 186 Democrats who have a different vision of what the state of New Hampshire should be. We're much more aspirational to have a New Hampshire that works for everybody, that's inclusive, that is based upon fairness and equity. And I don't see that coming. That's not part of the discussion that's taking place within the Republican caucus. I mean, to the extent that there are conflicts, within the caucus, as Democrats, we'll watch it. But what's more important to us is we're concerned about meeting the needs of the people of the state of New Hampshire, not some of this internal quibbling that the Republicans can do to see who can, be the most outrageous and most exclusive group. And again, we focus on meeting human needs, on developing the economy to have an economy that works for everybody. And that's what Democrats are focused on and will continue to be focused on. Whatever gets delivered from us to us from the Senate, we'll take a look at, as will Republican leadership. And I would expect it would go to conference committee just because of my understanding of how past practices and history is in this House.
Moving us away from the budget for just a moment, are there some priority bills that are important to you in your caucus that are still in progress right now, that are either in your hands, Senate bills that are in your hands that you're working on, or proposals that have been moved over to the Senate that you think are particularly important?
I think the issue of criminal justice reform is and remains very important. I mean, the governor set up a LIAC commission in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd. It came through with a number of recommendations. Not all of those survived the initial pass in the Senate. Some of them came to the House, and we weren't able to address all of those. But criminal justice reform is very important. I also think it's a matter that transcends traditional political party lines. I think it's a place we can find common ground in being smart on crime instead of just what we have in place now. I mean, I'm disappointed that we've done nothing about cannabis reform in the state of New Hampshire. That's been stymied by the House, by both the House and in the Senate by the Republican leadership. This is a place where legalization of cannabis is more popular than the legislature itself. And yet we seem unable to move forward and get in line with what is taking place in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Canada around it. We're kind of behind the times and all that. And it's a part of it's part of our failed criminal justice system that we do that. I think certainly for us, education remains a priority. It's fundamental to the vision that we have in the state of being inclusive, of giving everyone a chance. That's something that's important to us. Childcare is a very important thing, and also, trying to learn the lessons of what has happened during the pandemic on how we function as a government. I heard the conversation earlier with the speaker. For a number of years, Democrats have been in the forefront of trying to be open and transparent in our government system. One of the things that we've learned, what was impossible 2 years ago, that being having members of the public be able to participate remotely or, observe what goes on in the committees, became a necessity during the pandemic. And while, we hope as Democrats that we allow to provide for full citizen participation in the process. You referenced the business community being unable to do that. For people coming from the North Country who want to have input into bills that are before them, I've heard nothing but good things about the ability to participate remotely from people. And that's one of the things that we want to keep, along with things like telemedicine. I mean, there are things that, you want to learn and give meaning to the loss. And this is one of the things that we can do. That's part of what, our democratic agenda is, for accountability and transparency. And that's what we've advocated for during this entire pandemic. We'll continue to press forward as we transition away from the pandemic heights.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you, since I've asked all of the speakers today about kind of pandemic operations of the legislature, and particularly the remote access piece for committee work. And I'll just underscore again, as I did before, that I think in my years of doing this job and talking to our local delegation, they've always valued when a small business would make the trip up to Concord to share their perspective on a particular issue. But that's also the hardest thing for a small business owner to be able to do. So we have a real opportunity to preserve that access through this process, and perhaps improve it as well. So I would strongly endorse that continued consideration. And I think, kind of looking ahead, do you aside from that piece, I mean, the House has been, it's particularly challenging to meet remotely and to meet in person during this pandemic period. What's your sense of how things have gone overall, as we have just a minute or two left to wrap up before we transition at the end of the program?
Well, I'm terribly disappointed that the House has not been able to meet in session in a hybrid manner so that we can include those of our members who are most vulnerable during the pandemic. That's something that is being done that the Senate could do. It's something that legislators throughout the country have done. I've been disappointed. I think, quite frankly, it has a lot to do with a desire to suppress the full representation of my caucus within the House itself. Beyond that, we're still in the pandemic is not over. That's something that we still need to wrestle with. We can't take our eye off the ball. We need to continue to press forward to try to do best practices to get to the point where everyone can move beyond the pandemic and to return to kind of a different world, but one that's much more familiar to us. And and quite frankly, we're going to have to learn the lessons and recover from the pandemic is going to be the major challenge in the next year.
Well, Representative Cushing, I really appreciate the time here today. I know this is the next couple weeks in particular are extraordinarily busy for you and your colleagues. Really appreciate spending some time with us, and we would love to hopefully have you in person at our normal legislative symposium or dinner event that we typically do each spring that we've had to make virtual the last couple of years. So we'll have to look forward to doing that next year.
I would very much appreciate the opportunity to do that, Mike. Thank you to you and all the members for hosting us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative. So thank you to everyone for joining us. We're going to wrap up pretty much right on time. So glad we were able to get all of that into an hour. Just a reminder that you can share this. There will be a replay of this emailed to you. It'll also be on our YouTube channel. Want to plug our upcoming Citizen of the Year event, which is coming up in just a few weeks. We're actually thrilled to have our soon-to-be Citizen of the Year, Anna Thomas, on the event here this morning, joining us. We look forward to honoring her and the opportunity to not only virtually present the Citizen of the Year event, but have a in-person option as well at the Northeast Dental Stadium. Be a great chance to bring the community together for a nice celebration. Want to close again by thanking our sponsors, Dartmouth-Hitchcock Health, Manchester-Boston Regional Airport as our corporate sponsors, our advocate sponsors, Comcast Business, Fidelity Investments, and Granite State Credit Union. And a big thank you to Eversource for, again, being our presenting sponsor. Thank you so much for your engagement in this event today, and really appreciate it. Hope to see you all soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.